Hello there, Nick Zuccarello here, and for this video I would like to show you the continuation of what we were learning in Plasticity. For this video we're going to be taking a look at how we pull that work from Plasticity into ZBrush, and then we can make our own custom brushes like what you see here. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started, I wanted to draw your attention to a product that I made on Gumroad, and I'm going to be giving away all the different source material that I've made for this particular little series that I've got here. So I'm going to be giving away the plasticity files, all the files that I'm going to pull into ZBrush, and I'm actually going to give you the entire brush pack that I'm going to create as well. If you'd like, go ahead and visit this page on here. I'll put a link in the description, and you can see that if you use the discount code YouTube sub, then you will be able to get the product for free. I hope this helps you in creating new art and understanding process, and it just makes your life a little bit more enjoyable and helps you to learn how to be a better artist. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the previous video that I made called Introduction to Plasticity, Making Custom Brushes for ZBrush, Part 1. So if you want to understand how to make these brushes inside of Plasticity, go ahead and watch this video. I know it's a little bit long, but I try to cover a whole lot of things that I've learned by watching a bunch of different content. So I'm trying to bring everything that I can to the table in one video, so you can watch that one video and make every single one of these shapes that you see before us. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's hop on over to Plasticity. And so the next thing I want to talk to you about is just trying to get things organized to the best of your ability. Now, how many brushes you make, that's up to you, and that's determined by how many you put in here, but I'm trying to just lay this out in a nice, easy to kind of understand format for things. The next thing I'm going to show you is how we can actually get the work outside of Plasticity, and we'll pull that into ZBrush. Okay, I'm just going to tap 4 and I'm going to select one of my objects that you see here, and I'm going to come up here to the upper left hand corner and we're going to say export right here. We're going to have to give it a name before we can start seeing the options for this, so go ahead and give it a name. I've already made one, so you can see this. So here we have our model and we can see the different type of tessellation that it's going through. So right now it's set to tris. We can try quads as well, but quads is going to be a mixture of quads and also triangles, which don't be afraid about that. I think it's fine. So am going to put this on quads right here like this. And the next thing you might see is this density slider that you got. And so if you click and drag to the right, you can see we can go all the way up to 1 with this. Now I have been playing around with some of the numbers on here, and so my numbers might be a little bit different than yours. But if we take this face plane tolerance and we click and then we drag on here, you can see if we go to a higher number, you can see that it's not going to be having quite as much fidelity. But if we drag to the left, we can keep going and we can go to a much lower number like this, right? So if we do 0.001, we can get that really, really low. And then we can also try this face angle tolerance. And you can see that with this, if we drag this up a little bit, and if we go to the left with it, we might get higher fidelity in these corner parts and pieces. So if we wanted to go as high as we possibly could with that, we'll go down to 0.01. You can see we've got a lot of density now at that point, and it's going to slow things down. Also this edge plane tolerance. So if we were to drag this to the right, and it might be a little bit harder to see right now with everything that's going on, and we've got such density going on with this thing. Let's put this at 0.5 just so we can see what some of these numbers are doing with this, and maybe I'll make this a little bit higher with this one here. So if we drag this, maybe you start to see this number starting to make a little bit more of a difference. So drag this in through here. But again, I'm trying to just get a really high resolution mesh out of this. I don't want to kill my machine doing this, so we got to get some numbers that are not just going to completely and totally wreck our machine. But if we go lower with these numbers, we should be able to get a really nice density out of this, right? So ZBrush does not have any kind of a semblance of smooth shading, right? So if we turn off the wireframe on here, it's not even though this looks pretty amazing here, it's not going to have the same look inside of ZBrush, right? So you're going to be able to see all the individual polygons that are on here, And so we will have to deal with that, right? But when you find some numbers that you're happy with, and again, I would suggest trying to crank the numbers up and get a decent resolution out of this, just go ahead and hit OK, and it's going to export the thing out like that, okay? So that's going to run through and do that, but I'm going to actually select all the different parts and pieces that I've got right here like this and add this one to here. So everything I got selected, it's going to go ahead and export. So I'm going to go click here and say export, then click on here and say save. So that didn't take too much time, but after a little bit of time, it did finally do this for me. It tessellated everything. So I'm going to hit OK for that, and it's going to go ahead and save this out. So just let me pause this while it makes the file. Okay, here's my model right here. So I'm going to go ahead and open that and import that as an OBJ. Now, if I turn on the polyframe, you can see right here, right now, that everything's going to be coming over as one big giant polygroup. And everything's actually one object too. So I'm going to show you how we can actually get these split apart into different parts and pieces. So we're going to go to the Polygroups area. I'm just going to open this up. And if I do this button called Auto Groups, you can see it's going to take each one of these objects and actually put a polygroup on each one of these. Okay. Let me just show you in Plasticity real quick. The other thing is I took all my parts and pieces and I merged them all together. So this is just one object. This is one object. So if you've got a lot of parts and pieces, that will come on over whenever you go into ZBrush. So whenever you do this, you might see a bunch of different polygroups. Now, if that happens to you, what you can do is you can hold down Control Shift and you can drag over a particular area like this. And I do have symmetry turned on. Let me turn off symmetry. So I can tap X to turn off symmetry. And so now if I hold down Control Shift and I drag over a particular area, that's just going to select those particular polygons that we have here. And now if I hit Control Shift A, that grows out the entire selection for that particular island. So since these are not objects that are joined together, like welded together, they're seen as islands. If I hit Control W, that will make a polygroup for that. So if you run into this situation where you need to manually do some of this work, you can hold down Control Shift, drag out of a part of it, Control Shift A to grow all, and Control W will do a polygroup for whatever's visible. And you can see this on here, right there, like that. If you hit Control Shift and just tap, that will bring everything back. And if I did this, if I if I've got the polygroup now, I can hold down Control Shift, click on it. That will give me just that polygroup. And if I hold on Control Shift and then drag, it will give me the inverse of that. So we can keep doing that. Now, once I've got the inverse set up, I can hold down Control Shift and I can select polygroups. So this is the way that you can control visibility. And if I wanted to group these all together, I can hit Control W again and group visible like that. So you got a couple different options for how you can build polygroups. So to bring everything back, I just hold down again Control Shift, just tap in the open viewport, and that will bring back the visibility of everything that we've got. All right. So that's how we can set up our polygroups for this. And then the next step is going to allow us to split these things apart. So if you go up to the subtool area and you take a look, let me reduce this visible count just to drop it down to make this go a little bit smaller in through here. We can go to the area for split. And because we've made polygroups on everything, we can do group splits. So let's go ahead and click this. It's an undoable option. Tells you about that. Not a big deal. Just hit OK. All right. So now we've got these split into separate objects. And if you want to do a little shortcut, you can hold down Alt and you can click in the viewport and you can see this. I do have polyframe on, which is Shift F for the hotkey for that. And we can take a look at the object one at a time like this. All right. I also like to look at things in solo mode, and I put my own custom hotkey on there, and I just used Alt S for that. So I use that all the time, and I would highly recommend that you make a hotkey for that. And then you have that ability to be able to select one of these objects at that point, just hide everything else, and then just kind of concentrate on that particular object that you see. Okay. So I'm going to turn off solo. And I'm going to find one of these objects that's problematic. Now, if the polygon count on this is high enough, you're going to see some pretty good shading. This one looks pretty good on this one here that we see. And some of these other ones, not so great. So I'm going to show you how we can kind of up-res the model or deal with the fact that we've got some of this going on. And I think this may be a pretty complex model, so I'm going to hold down Alt and click on that one and show you this. I'll just hit Alt S and isolate just that one. I'll tap F and I can frame in on it like that. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build polygroups for this entire object, but I'm going to show you an option that's really nice. So we go to polygroups. There's a group by normal. So if I just click this with the default option of a max angle of 45, let's go click that. You can see it's going to do a pretty good job of separating all this. And now I can turn off this line information and I can see just the polygroups that are being generated from this. So it picked up a lot of what I wanted. It's going to give me a difference for this side, this side, this side. And I'm just going to tell you what we're going to do with this information. So we're going to be able to hold creasing data on here. And that's one way. If we add subdivision levels and we up the levels of this. So if I hit Control D to add a subdivision level, you can see this whole thing just falls apart. So I'm going to hit undo for that. What I'm going to try to do is add crease data to this, and that will hold all these edges. And it'll do a pretty good job. We'll see what it does. And if that doesn't work for us, we're going to convert this over to Dynamesh. And if we do that, and we've got polygroups on there, that's going to give us some options that we can use for polishing, okay? And it will recognize these different shapes. So I want to capture a little bit more information. I want to try to get this in here, and I want to get this as a separate polygroup. So I'm going to try taking this max angle and doing something like 15 and see where we land with that. And so that's actually going to work pretty good for me. That's going to give me all these separate parts and pieces here. So you might just have to play around with the value and see what it gives. If I drop too low with that, let's do like 5. I might start to pick up, yeah, I'm starting to get all kinds of polygroups in here. And you can see this is making polygroups on each one of these because that angle is less than like 5 degrees on there. So I'm going to go back to 15. Just hit group by normal, and let's go even a little bit lower and see what else I can possibly pick up on that. I wasn't sure if I would get like an edge right there, and let's do maybe 7. It doesn't look like it's going to give me exactly what I'm looking for on there. So just like we were doing before, now that we've made this separate object, if we hold down Control Shift, we can actually select these different polygroups that we see in here, and we can hold down Control Shift and then add these parts and pieces on there like that. So maybe 15 will still be a good option for me. All right. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is you can see how it's picking up this little tiny part right there, which I don't really want. So I'm going to pick that up. Now, if we run into this situation, and if I want to be really clean about this, I can hold down Control Shift, click on that, and you can see I've got this little tiny sliver there. And so I hold down Control Shift and clicked on that. And now remember, to get the inverse of this, I can hold down Control Shift and then drag. And then now I've got that thing together, and I hit Control W. And then I just made that all into one big giant polygroup. So it's a whole lot more clean now at that point. So you might find yourself in that situation where you got to do a little bit of cleanup work, but probably nothing too intense for you. All right. So the next part, we are going to go to geometry, and there's an area called Crease, and we'll open that up. And what we can do is hit this Crease PG, so for Crease Polygroup. Go ahead and do that. Now, if we turn on our line, we can actually see what's going on, and you'll see with the creasing information, it's got this like double line along these polygroups that we see here. All right, so let's turn off the polyframe, and we can see ZBrush does not do any smooth shading between the normals on here. So you just need a whole lot of polygons to get this to smooth out. So I'm going to try to add a subdivision level, and I'll show you where that's at. It's right here for divide. See the hotkey is Control D for that. So I'm going to hit Control D. We're going to divide up. And that's starting to get things to look a little bit nicer. I'm going to divide one more time. Now, the only thing that's maybe problematic is you might see a little bit of a pimple on the surface right here, and then this, because of the way that we had triangles and everything and how it's dividing, maybe not going to be the best option for us, right? So I could take this, I could Dynamesh this. It's going to retain the polygroup information for us. So that's one option. So we could do that. And even before we started dividing, if I drop this down to the lowest subdivision level, if I do turn this into Dynamesh, Dynamesh is going to try to capture the exact shape of what we got going on here. Okay. Let me go back right before we divided and see if there's any difference between this mesh. So I'm going to go back. So this is what it looks like, right? If I Dynamesh this thing, it's going to give me this exact same thing that we've got, but it's going to make it with a whole bunch of polygons. So let me just show you what it means, okay? So we're going to go there. We're going to go to Dynamesh. I'm going to go ahead and choose the resolution. I'm going to choose something really high. I'm going to start with about 2000 and then just hold down Control and drag, and it will remesh for us. And so that's still not even high enough. I wish there was a great formula for this maybe later on, but as the time of the making of this video, there are some plugins where you can put in an exact amount for Dynamesh. It is dependent on the size of the model, so you might have to play around. If I were you, I would try to go with a lower number first, see where you're at with that, and if you need to keep raising it up, I would raise it up in increments, right? So we did 2,000. I'm going up pretty high, and I'm going to 3,000 right now. And you can see still it's not going to be super great, right? The highest that we can go with this is 4,096. And I'll just go ahead and remesh for that and see where we're at with everything. So again, even though I'm going to have a whole lot of different polygons, and you can see upping that number becomes a little bit dangerous because it's generating a lot of polygons. No matter what that number is, the model is still going to be faceted because it's just capturing the shape that we have. So there's just not enough geometry there. Now what we can do is if we hold down Control Shift, we click on that. I do have Polish by feature. I've got it on my interface that you can get on Gumroad. You can search for my name, Nick Zook, and find on my Gumroad page, you can find my interface if you want my interface. If I hold down Control, it'll tell me where this stuff sits. This is actually under the deformation palette. If I want to open this with this, I hold down Shift, click, open that up, and I'll do polish by feature. I've got the donut hole thing turned off, so that's going to change the algorithm, but I can polish that, and you can see how it's going to polish that up. Now, if I bring everything back, Control Shift, and then just click, it does recognize these polygroups that we've got. I'll turn off the line information, and you can see if I do polish by features and then do just drag that, it's going to polish everything up, but it's not going to do the best job along these edges through here, okay? So that's just a kind of a long explanation for me to show you what is going on. So that is one way of doing it. But if I could get away with dividing the model first, so let me go ahead and hit Control D. Oops. And I need to actually take the crease information and then hit the crease polygroup. Let's turn this on so we can see what's going on. So I'll do the crease polygroup just like that. I'll turn the frame off. Now I hit Control D, and you can see it's going to hold this thing fairly well for us. And then now, if I want to polish, I can. We can polish that up. That's a possibility. You can see that's going to look pretty clean. But if we want to get rid of some stuff like this, we can convert this on over to Dynamesh at that point. So let's go to the Dynamesh area. If you remember, I just crank that thing all the way up, and then I'll remesh just like this. And so we're going to remesh this, give it a little bit of time. And then after that, then we can start to polish the surface up. Again, with Control Shift, if I click on that part, I can do this. This is another technique. Maybe I only want to polish this area, right? So I can hold down Control and just tap in the screen, and that will give me a mask for whatever's visible. Now I can hold down Control Shift, tap in the open viewport, and then I want the inverse of this. So just like Photoshop, if I hit Control I, that will do the inverse of that. And then another cool thing that they've got is if you hold down Control and you tap on the mask, it will blur the mask out. So now when I do this polish by feature, I'm only going to polish up this polygroup right here. It's really doing everything, but we've masked out everything with a soft mask, and so it's allowing us to grab these edges that we see. So I'm going to do this polish by feature and just polish that up. and you can see that's going to look nice and clean. So I'm going to do the same thing for this one. I'm going to do Control Shift, click on this part, I'll hold down Control, tap on the screen, and that will mask that part. Control Shift tap to bring everything back, and I'll invert the mask. If you just tap on the screen, holding down Control, that will invert the mask, or you can do Control I. It's up to you, however you want to do it. Control click on the mask to soften it up, and then I'll do this polish by feature, and you can see now we've got a super clean shape that we've got going on. Okay, so I know I'm showing you this for making these brushes and everything, but this workflow works for anything that you're going to create in Plasticity and bring over to ZBrush. So if you're making cool sci-fi guns or anything like a vehicle, this technique holds up for everything. Okay, so I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to do this for each one of the shapes and get everything nice and clean, and then when we come back, we'll start talking about how we can actually make the different types of brushes that we have. Okay, I've gone through and I've actually cleaned everything up. And to be honest, the only thing that really gave me a whole lot of trouble was this piece here and then this piece here. Just the way that it was dividing up and through these areas on the flat pieces. And so that needed to have a little bit more finesse in this area for polishing up. And let me turn on the line here. So what I ended up doing was actually holding the edges, making the polygroups. Then I converted this over to Dynamesh. I was only using a resolution of 3000 for that, but there were some problem areas in here, and you can still see a little bit of the problem in this area. And so what I was doing with this is if I hold down Control and I just drag or paint a mask on here like that, and I'll just click outside of that to do the inverse of that. It doesn't even really need to be all that clean. We looked at using polish by feature, but there is another different type of polish that we can use under deformation. And if we just go to deformation and polish, this is a different type of polish again. And if I just run that slightly on there, you can see it starts to fix up that problem a little bit. I do have to be a little bit careful about that. And if I don't want this to ruin some of this in here, again, my ability to paint a mask on here and then invert the mask and then polish that is going to give me pretty good results. And then maybe I do a little bit of polish by feature, just a little bit. You can see how that's stretching that just a little bit there. So I'm just going to run that polish by feature, but then everything should be cleaned up. I still looks like there's a little weird thing there. Just run a polish by feature. Actually, I'll just do the polish. You can see how it just got rid of that little tiny thing. But that's being pretty nitpicky about stuff. So that all looks pretty clean. There's still a few little edges on this one if I hold down Alt and click on that. So if I paint across here like this, and I can't remember, yeah, I did do Dynamesh on that one. So if I do that and then just invert the mask, I'll hold down Control, smooth out the mask a little bit. Then maybe I do polish by feature and release that little donut hole thing there. Just kind of slide that there like that. And let's go a little bit stronger with it, okay? And you can see we've got everything is nice and smooth there. So depending on what you do with your stuff, I'm going to hit Shift R just to do a nice render on there. You can see here's all the different polygroups. I actually didn't even need to do anything for this shape at all. This one looked pretty good. But I do want to make sure all this holds up as we get in closer to this stuff. If I do put on the polyframe for this, you can see these were Dynamesh. These are just still subdivision levels. I already showed you that one earlier. That's just subdivision levels. Holding that, same for this. Didn't do anything to this one. Just held the edges on that, divided it. Same for that. This one too. Now some of these were a little bit problematic in the center of this, so I just hold down Control Shift, click on that, make a mask, invert the mask, and then polish that. Now one thing I didn't show you is this. If I showed just that part, make a mask, so I'm gonna hold down Control and click on it, Control Shift click to bring everything back. If I want to soften this mask inward, I can hold down Control and it'll start to soften it going in towards that shape, and then now I can do the inverse of it. If I did that, you can see it's going to soften it out towards there. So maybe I should just do a polish by feature there like that. And yeah, so the other thing is you can just hold down Shift. You could do some brush smoothing too. So maybe that helps. Oops, let me undo that. The other thing that you could do is to change the smoothing algorithm. If you hold down shift and you start smoothing and you let go of shift, it's a different smoothing algorithm that's more like a relax. So that could potentially help you smooth out some of those parts that are being problematic for you. I do know on this shape, I built polygroup information along this whole thing right here and here. And so that was just a little bit more difficult in there just to hold that edge, and that kept that shape nice and clean. So yeah, you're going to have to just get a little bit more familiar with how to make polygroups and do the creasing information. And the more times you go through it, you're going to start to understand like how to solve certain problems and things like that, right? Okay, so that should get you nice clean shapes. And then the next part we're going to go through, we'll take a look at how we can actually capture this as depth information and build this into a brush. Okay, we're finally at the point where we can start to build our own brush data. So again, I'm going to use this shape. I think it's a nice complex shape that we can use and should have everything we need to understand the process. So I'm going to hold down Alt and then click on that shape. And again, I can hit Alt S to do a solo on there for this. Okay, so because we've set up a square format, and basically I'm going to build an alpha in here, and it'll be nice if that's actually square, we need to change our document inside of ZBrush. So if you don't know, the origins of ZBrush started off as a 2.5D like paint program that had the Z depth information on there. So this whole idea of like Photoshop and a canvas, this is under document right here, right? So this is telling us the size of our document, and this is a proportion button. I'm going to turn that off. And if I'm used to using powers of 2 for like what we do for textures and video games and everything, if I do a 2048 by 2048, we can do that, and I'll go ahead and click resize. It'll say, hey, would you like to resize a document? Sure, yeah, let's do that. And then it does something funky to your canvas, and then you've got this weird, like, why is my cursor white kind of thing. Well, you're actually like putting brush data that's like pixels onto the screen. So all we really need to do is just drag out one copy. You can tap T for that, and then now you got this 3D mode, and you're going to want to get this gunk off the canvas. So you can hit Control N for that, and that'll clear that. Okay, so my recording dimensions I think is 2560 by 1440. So maybe I don't see all the canvas on here, but I can come up here to this side, and then these are kind of like Photoshop controls where you're panning and you're zooming in and out of the canvas. And this is going to let you see the actual pixels. This is how you would really want to work. If you do this AA half, it's going to take the document, shrink it down like 50%. And that's why now you can probably barely see this border that we've got on here. But if I hold on Alt and then click and drag like this to zoom in, or you can do Control right click, and that's going to zoom in for you. You can see if I take this and I tap F, it's going to tap F again. It's going to frame this on that canvas part, right? Now I do have perspective turned on. I go ahead and turn the perspective off. You can tap P for that to turn on and off perspective. And then again, if I tap F once and then tap it twice, you can see it's going to fill up the canvas and it's going to get to the extents of this. So again, if I go to the actual right over here, I'm not going to be able to see all that. So I'm going to go back to this AA half, just like we've got here. And to be honest, maybe this is not going to be an issue. I am a little bit worried about maybe some of this edge showing up on the alpha that it generates. So what I'm going to do is hold down Alt and then just let go real quick. That's how I zoom in and out. However you want to zoom in, it's up to you. If you want to do these really fine granular controls, maybe you just zoom in with this thing. I never use these controls off to the side, and I don't recommend it. I recommend taking the time to actually learn how to zoom in and out and pan and do everything without this. It's going to make you a whole lot faster. But in certain cases like this, maybe it is kind of nice just to zoom in on something like that a little bit easier, okay? So the next thing is we're going to actually turn this into the depth information. So we're just going to go to alpha, click on here, and you can say this grab doc. It's going to grab the alpha from the document and go ahead and put that right in there. Okay. So we're already beginning to start building a brush. But I do know that with our session in here, I've got my hotkeys set up for 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And this is my standard brush. And I don't want anything that we're doing to mess with this. So I'm going to come up here immediately to go to brush, and I'm going to click clone. And then you're going to see it's going to take the standard brush and it's going to put this standard _1. So it's going to leave alone my default standard brush, and now it's going to start making a new brush, and we can do whatever we want with that, right? So for these brushes, I want to use a stroke type of drag rectangle like this, okay? The next thing that we can do is if we want to grab a sphere or something like that, if I go to a subtool and I don't want to mess with this make polymesh 3D. So if you don't know anything about ZBrush, it's going to make primitives for you, and you would have to come over here, click on this, make a sphere 3D, and then that's just a primitive, and to actually start sculpting on it, you got to make a polymesh 3D, so that takes a little bit of time. The other thing you can do is hit the comma key, and you can go to your tools area, and you can double click on this polysphere like this. This is actually a sphere that's got subdivision levels on it already. So if I tap F on there, that'll frame that up. So you can see that. That's another option for you. Or you can come here and click append, and you can append a sphere 3D, and then it automatically does this whole make polymesh 3D thing for you. Okay, so that's a big explanation for you, but if you're wondering why you can't sculpt on it, that's what's going on with that. So this one, if I use that polysphere that we looked at, you can see it's already got some subdivision levels on it. It's got 3 of them. So I'm just going to take this and divide it up maybe 2 more times like this. Okay, so I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out just like this, and you can see that even at this resolution, there's still not enough polygons for that. So let's go ahead and divide it another time, see where we're at. That's looking pretty clean for us, right? So that's pretty good. The next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to start looking at the intensity and this focal shift, right? So for the longest time, and I've been a long time ZBrush user, and I was confused about this for so long. Why does my alpha not stay 100% strength on the edges? And it's because of this focal shift setting. So this is kind of like a fall off, right? So if we drag it over here like this, you can see it's going to be really, really soft. And if I get closer to 100, it's hardly doing any of the brush. If we put it back on 0, it's going to give us most of it, but it falls off on the edge. And if we do this focal shift -100, that's going to give us 100% of our value that we need on there. But then now we've got this issue going on with our corners, right? So there's some things that we can do for that. Also, intensity matters too. So obviously, if I put this at 100% intensity, that's a bit too much. Maybe you want to find a sweet spot with this. So let's try like 50 on there, and that looks pretty good for the depth that it's going to push out. So you really got to figure out what exactly is that number per brush on here, and what you're comfortable with. So I'll leave that at 40 right there. Then the other thing that we can do is go to the alpha palette. I'm going to go ahead and click this, and I'm going to take this little button, click and drag it over here to that area. Now, if this is not open for you, you can double click this to open and close it, just like that. And then you're basically docking this palette over here so we can work with it. I'm going to go to modify. And what we can do is we can take this mid value that we've got, and this is saying from a grayscale going from black to white, what do you want to be the mid value for how this thing pulls out? Let's see right now. So like if I click and drag right here, set to 0, let's try 50 and see what that does. So that's pushing the shelf in a little bit. If I put this at 25, we can go here, and we're getting closer to what that number is. If I do something like 22, let's see if I do 23. Let me see what this value. If I go 30, I'm trying to find like how this is moving in. So that's getting closer to sitting directly on the surface. 29. There we go. That feels pretty darn good. And if you let's just say, let's go back to this 30. And we click and we drag out, and we got just a little tiny bit on there, right? You can mess around with this radial fade. That will kind of fade out the outer edges, but you gotta be careful. Like with the circular thing, it works pretty good because this radial fade is radial, so it's circular. And if we get anything that's square, it might start to ruin some of the detail on there. So let me just try even something like 2 and click and drag out, and you can see it's gonna do something pretty good for us. So we'll even try like 1, and we can see what's going on there. Let's put this back to 0. It does look like it's doing some kind of weird little rim thing around there. So I don't really want that. We could try this. I'm gonna see about this using this max range as well. When we do that, that kind of changes this value that we've got on there. You could do AA for anti-aliasing the alpha. So it looks like that's changing things a little bit again. So let's go back to 29. What I would recommend is if you can find the value that fits the best for it. I know it might take you just a little bit of time to find where that sits, but that looks nice and clean, right? So I'm going to probably make this just a little bit stronger. Let's try intensity of 45, something like that, right? And then the next thing is if I want to build an icon for this that you see here, I'm just going to click and drag this thing out, try to make it nice and large like this. And then we're going to come to our matte cap that we have here. And if we can find the toy plastic, okay, here it is right here. Sorry, it took me just a little bit to actually find that. So click on toy plastic, and that's going to make it pretty bright in here. I'll just tap F to frame in on this, and then change the camera just to try to get this thing to line up where I want that thing to be. And then if we go to brush, and let's go ahead and dock this for just a second, you can see there is this select icon. So we click on that, it makes an icon for us, right? And then if you want to actually put your brush credits in here, you can go to edit brush credits, and you can say who you are and link to your website and everything else like that. So pretty cool. All right, so all you really need to do is say save as, and you're going to save this brush. And I'm going to put it where I've got my tools and resources, right? So what I like to do is I've got all my brushes that I've made. I've got other people's brushes. I like to keep these things organized, and I've built shortcuts to this and put the shortcuts in where when you go to Lightbox, you can actually see the location in Lightbox for things. And if I put that shortcut to this brushes folder in the right area inside of ZBrush, it will actually find these. So let me show you what this looks like in just a second. So I just like to call these my standard brushes. I'm making some tech brushes, and I'll call this tech brush 1. Let's say tech brush from video, like that. Just save it. Okay. And then if I hit the comma key and I go to the brushes area, you can see here is where I've got this shortcut sitting, and this is where you want to put the shortcut. You can see your version of ZBrush, so program files, Pixel Logic, whatever the version of ZBrush is, there's a ZBrushes folder, and if you put that shortcut in this brushes folder, you'll actually see the shortcut, and it takes you there. And what I've done is I've made, again, my own folder for my stuff, other people's work. So now I can go in here and I can navigate and I can make folders. I can organize everything. And so we just did these standard brushes, and then we just did tech. So here's my new brush that I got with my icon. Double click on it to load it for this session. And then now I've got that brush, and I can start pulling out that brush and using it on my designs that I've got. Okay. So not too complicated at all, but you do have to understand how to be kind of clean with this and get everything set up and which parts and pieces to use. So I hope this helps you and helps you build your own brushes, and then starts to help you build a library of different brushes. And again, what I've done with this, and I've got a few. I used a different material for this, but I've got quite a few different ones that I've built up and made some different shapes on there. So it's going to make your life a whole lot easier whenever you're going to start making some tertiary details and you get to that final part when you make some really cool details on your meshes. This will be a really nice process for you, and you're going to get really super clean results with this process. Okay, after a little bit of time and effort, I went ahead and created all the different brushes that I had, and I actually went back to some previous files that I had, and I made brushes from those too. I'm going to be giving all these brushes away to you, If you download it from me through Gumroad, you should be able to unpack this zip file, and whenever you get done with that, there should be a folder that basically says Plasticity ZBrush brushes, like this. And so you should see all the different brushes in here. I was going to take you through a few of the different brushes and show you what I created and how you could potentially use some of those. One of my favorite brushes that I've got here is this Plasticity Tech Brush 30. And if you double click that and load that, you can see it drags out something like this, what we see here. And if I tap X to turn on symmetry, I actually have radial symmetry turned on. So I'm going to go to the transform tab, and then I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag this over to the left. And again, we can open and close this part of the interface by just double clicking on that right there. With symmetry activated, we can turn on this radial symmetry button right here, and we can tell it which direction do you want to go for the symmetry. So if we did X, you see it's going to be going up and down right here like this. If we do Y, it's going to go around the perimeter. And if we do Z, it's going to go in this direction here for us. You can actually turn them all on at the same time, and it's a bit chaotic and crazy, but maybe you find some kind of use for that. I've actually done a few things with that before in the past, but what I'm going to use right now is just Y with the radial count of 8. And I'm just going to rotate my canvas a little and hold down Shift to just kind of snap it. And I'm going to click and drag straight up like this and through here. And then I'll just do another one right here in this area, some smaller ones. And I thought that was kind of neat. If I tap the comma key for me and go back into Lightbox, I can go pick a different one. And what I was going to pick is something that is like a shape like this. So if I just drag out for something like that, it's nice and clean. But if I go to the bottom of this, if I bunch up these brushes right to the center, I can drag out from the center and it should give me something like that, right? I'm gonna hit undo. Did you see what was going on the top of this thing? It looked like it was affecting the top. If you ever get that, you can turn on backface masking, and that exists within your brush palette. If I hold down control over this, you see the button path at the bottom says brush auto masking backface mask. So you could find that up in the brush palette and find auto masking just like it said in here, and you can turn on, I'm sorry, backface masking on there. The other thing is I'm going to tap U to control the intensity of this. It was really, really strong, so I'll just drag this down to maybe something like this in 16, because I do have multiple brushes directly over the top of each other, so that's going to be very, very strong for that. If you get anything like this where I'm basically taking the mesh that I've got and it's stretching the topology, if you see some of this, it's not going to look so great. You can hold down Shift and maybe smooth some of that stuff out just a little bit. The other thing you could potentially do is if you hold down Control and then paint a mask in this area. I'm going to paint a mask here like this, and then I'm going to hold down Control and then click on the mask to smooth that out a little bit, just like that, and then click in here for the inverse and then maybe smooth it a little bit more. You could potentially polish this information and maybe that makes it look a little bit better. So I've just noticed that, you know, when you get stretching on the model, you can do some things like that. We could also maybe just hold down Control and then drag out a nice little line like this, and then I'll go ahead and inverse that. I do have inflate with this. This is in the deformation palette. If I hold on Control, you can see it's under button path tool, deformation inflate. So that exists over here in this area. I use this quite a bit, so I've got it on my interface like this. And again, you can find that on Gumroad if you want. I'm just going to go drag this in a little bit, and then I'm going to hold on Control and smooth the mask, and then just do a little tiny polish. And again, this polish is a little bit different than the polish by feature. Polish by feature takes a look at your polygroups, and it recognizes that, and it respects that. So I could just do something like this, and then maybe if I wanted to do something similar down here, but do a much larger shape for that, I could do this, and instead of inflating inward, maybe I go out with it a little bit, and then just hold on Control, click on the mask, smooth it, and maybe do a little bit of a polish on there. I'll just tap P for perspective. I'll go back into my brush set by hitting the comma key. And again, I've got quite a few different things within here that you could try out and take a look at. I think I'm going to maybe just give something like this a try, see what this looks like in through here. And that's a pretty heavy detail, and it's pretty large, so maybe I'll go a whole lot smaller with it. And again, with this tapping U for the intensity, we can change the intensity of our brush. I thought this one turned out a little interesting where it's got almost like a bubble and a puck to it, and it's this one here. The icon doesn't necessarily represent exactly what that thing looks like, but if I go ahead and I drag out this direction, so if you drag, I'm starting here and dragging down, it makes it flow that direction. If I click and drag up, I can make it flip basically for the direction that it goes, like this. So I don't know. I just thought that was a little bit of an interesting shape there for that, right? So the other thing I can do is maybe put a mask on here, control click to invert the mask. If I put it on the gizmo tool, hold down Alt to go to the center of the unmasked point, hold down Alt to refresh. And if I want to change the pivot of this, I can hold down Alt and I can just click and drag right here like that for myself. And I can just drag this thing up like this, and maybe, oops, I'll just go ahead and push that in just a little bit here like this. And again, I could go ahead and polish that a little here on the edge, just like that. So yeah, I think there's quite a few different uses, and you'll have to go through the different brushes and see what works for you and what do you like. Um, and then from there, I was I've got subdivision levels on this right now. This is what I was using to actually generate the icons for the brush pack. And then let me lower the intensity of this. But what I found what worked pretty good for me was if I took this information and I converted it over to Dynamesh. So I'll show you that real quick. Just go to geometry and I'm going to go to Dynamesh. I do need to find a resolution that's going to work for me. They do have this picker, and if I click and drag out on this, it's going to choose the resolution of this. Let's see if that actually works for us. I'm going to click this. I do have subdivision levels, so I'm going to tell it no, I don't want to freeze the subdivision levels. And you can see it did the best it could trying to match that. I still think so. Again, if I click and drag out on these different parts and pieces, I'll watch the number change on that a little bit. And I like this. I'm gonna get something here, and then I'm gonna go a bit higher with it. So I'll go 2,500. And then there's also this blur, and if you turn that down, maybe that gets things a little bit more crisp for you at that point. Also, I did notice I was showing you how you could polish some of these areas like this within here. And let me go to do the inverse of that. Just do this a little bit, and then I'll just do a slight polish on it. The other thing we could try, and I'll just do this as a universal thing right above Dynamesh, is clay polish. And if I use this and just click clay polish, it'll tighten up some of the details on some of that and crispen things up. So that seemed to work pretty good for me on that. The next thing I would do is I can create a more low resolution version of this and put let ZBrush do its own UV thing for it. So if I actually had this, then I could just duplicate this one here. I'll put it on solo, so I'm just working with this and just looking at this one particular one. So if I go to Z plugin and I use Decimation Master, and if I had Polypaint on this, I could keep the Polypaint by say using Keep Polypaint. But I could take this and I could say preprocess current, and then after it's done processing this, then I could put this at a percentage of decimation and then maybe put this down to something pretty low like 15%. Or if I wanted to say specifically how many polygons that I want for this, I could put in here, if I put 15, then it's going to be 15,000 polys. And then basically I could kick out that low res mesh and put some UVs on it. And if I wanted to pull that into Substance Painter, I could end up kicking out this high res version and a low res version, and then I could actually do some baking between the two. So as soon as this finishes up, I'll show you this K polys, and depending on the size of your mesh, this process is going to take just a little bit longer, but it looks like this is going to go through fairly quick. Okay, that's actually done. And now if I do 15 for this K polys and say decimate current, you can see I'm going to drop that thing down. It's not going to look super great here, but we're going to be able to smooth the normals in other programs. So basically we're just looking to get a nice silhouette on this. And now that this is dropped down, we could use some of the UV tools on here, and I'll just turn off symmetry. I'm just going to tell it to unwrap this, and it should go fairly quickly for this. These are not going to be great UVs, but they're just, let's say you want to get something into Unreal and you want to get it done kind of quickly, right? Just to check things out. This is a workflow that could work for you. So if I do flatten, you can see here's the UVs that it's going to generate for me, which is not too bad for just clicking one button. Again, this is not something I would suggest for production ready things, but to get things moving, I think this could work for you. But now that the UVs are set up on this, I could go up through here and I could export this out as either an OBJ or I could do an FBX, and then I would just call this my low version. And then after you do that, if I hit undo for this, get back here before we actually reduce this, I'm going to try to I could just do the undo slider and then should be able to get back. I could export this whole thing out by itself. You can see it's going to be pretty high. That's like, 3.6 million polygons. So if you did want to reduce that just to help your computer out at all, you could go back to the decimation master right here, and you could do the preprocess current, and then maybe at this point, maybe for K polys, maybe you just put it at 1,500 for 1.5 million polys or something like that. So that's a way that you can get both a high res mesh and a low res mesh out of this process, and then you can send it over to Substance Painter, do a little work, and then send it over for that. Okay, so now that I've shown you a bit about the process and what's possible with this, I'm going to be giving you all this different content so you can try this out for yourself. So I'm going to step through and I'll show you the different things that I'm going to give you. So let me go to the front side of this here. So this is everything that we did in the video content. You're going to get all this ZBrush file. So you're going to see it's going to, let me do this. I'll just do this real quick. If I render it with the polyframe on, you can see that you're going to get all the different shapes, and you can see what I created for polygroups and exactly what I made for these different brushes on there. And then to prep for the work, I did some brushes beforehand, and I'm going to give you all those in the ZBrush file. I'm also going to give you this sphere that we were working on at the very beginning of this, right here, this one. And if I drag this all the way back to the very beginning, I just had a very, very dense sphere that was ready to drag the brushes on there so you can create icons. So if you wanted to make your own brushes, you've got that and you're ready to go with that as well. Let me hop on over to Plasticity and I can show you the files that I'm going to give you that are from Plasticity. So of course, everything that we did in this video series, I'm going to give you that actual file that we have there, but I'm also going to give you the files that I made previous to this, just trying to figure out some of these workflows. So let me load that and I'll show you that. Okay, here's the other files that I made for Plasticity. And again, I'm going to give you both these files so you can check them out and you can take a look at everything that I created for that. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is the actual brush pack that I made. So let's hop over to ZBrush and take a look at that. So here we are, and I should be able to give you this in the Gumroad format where you're going to get a zip file and you can unzip this and it's going to give you all these different brushes and you're going to have access to everything that I created. So again, I hope all this works, help you understand process. If you enjoy the brushes that I made, feel free to use them. If you feel like this content really helped you in any way, please consider subscribing to my channel. But really, my goal is to try to teach you enough about these programs. Please share this content with your fellow artists or friends that are looking to get into these programs, work, and start learning how to improve your overall designs and your ability just to be an artist.